Libra, stop for a second. Before you scroll, before you tell yourself this is just another message, let me ask you something real. When was the last time money stress didn't sit quietly in the back of your chest? Not loud, not dramatic, just there. Every decision, every compromise, every time you chose peace over fairness. Because Libra, you don't struggle because you're careless. You struggle because you've been balancing everyone else while quietly absorbing the cost. And here's what makes this moment different. Between January 5 and 7, something shifts. Not luck, not fantasy. A pressure point releases, and the scales you've been holding alone finally begin to move. If you're here, listening right now, that's not random. Stay with me, because what opens next isn't just about money. It's about the moment you realize you don't have to keep paying for balance with your own peace. And this is where the story truly begins. Libra, stay right here with me. I'm not speaking to everyone, I'm speaking to you. Because there's a kind of exhaustion you carry that doesn't come from doing nothing. It comes from doing too much, quietly, from holding the middle, from smoothing the edges so no one else has to bleed. You've learned how to keep things calm, how to read the room before anyone else speaks, how to give a little more so the tension dissolves. And most people will never notice how much that costs you. Money pressure, for you, hasn't been about recklessness. It hasn't been about poor choices. It's been about compromise. Every time you chose peace over fairness, every time you absorbed a loss so someone else could feel comfortable, every time you said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. That kind of imbalance doesn't explode. It settles. It sits in the chest. It follows you into quiet moments, into grocery aisles, into decisions you hesitate to make because you're already calculating who might be affected. And here's something no one says out loud. Being fair-minded in an unfair system slowly trains you to accept less than you deserve. Not because you believe you're worth less, but because you believe harmony matters more. Tell me, when did you start confusing survival with balance? Because real balance doesn't ask one side to carry all the weight. You didn't imagine this pressure. You didn't exaggerate it. You've been standing slightly tilted for a long time now, adjusting yourself so everything else could stay upright. And the body remembers that. The nervous system remembers. Your bank account reflects it in subtle ways. Not dramatic collapse, just constant restraint. Constant holding back. But something has shifted. Not loudly, not suddenly. More like the moment before a scale finally tips. That quiet click when gravity decides it's done waiting. Between January 5th and 7th, the energy around you doesn't ask you to push harder. It doesn't demand effort. It does something far more precise. It begins to return weight to where it belongs. You may feel it as a soft loosening first. A sense that you don't need to brace as tightly. That one small worry doesn't land as heavy as it did before. And here's the part that matters most. This isn't about money chasing you. It's about you no longer standing in the wrong position when it arrives. There's a difference. You are not being tested again. You're being realigned. So as you listen, notice what happens when you stop explaining yourself. When you stop justifying why you've been patient. When you allow the idea that maybe, just maybe, you were never meant to carry this alone. And let me ask you this, gently. If balance finally began working for you instead of costing you, what would you release first? Take a breath. Don't answer yet. Because the next part of this story doesn't start with gain. It starts with relief. Libra, I want you to notice something with me. Not the noise outside, not the deadlines, not the numbers on a screen. Notice the way your body responds when you stop bracing. Because what's opening between January 5th and 7th doesn't announce itself with urgency. It doesn't rush in. It doesn't demand belief. It adjusts. Like the quiet moment when a room finally stops tilting and you realize you've been standing crooked just to keep everything else level. This is not a test. It's a correction. For a long time, your life has been operating with one subtle imbalance. Not enough to break things, just enough to keep you constantly compensating. You learned to smooth it out, to adapt, to become the stabilizer instead of the one being supported. And systems get used to that. They keep leaning. Between these days, January 5th through 7th, something presses back, not against you, for you. It's like a pressure point that has been waiting for the exact right touch, not force, precision. You may not see it immediately, but you'll feel it. A pause where there used to be urgency. A delay that suddenly works in your favor. A realization that you no longer need to rush to make things fair on your own. This window doesn't bring fireworks. It brings alignment, the kind that slips into place quietly, like gears finally catching after grinding for years. What you've given too much of begins to return in new forms, not always from the same places, not always with apologies attached. Sometimes balance restores itself, without explanation. And I know part of you hesitates here. Because when you've lived a long time carrying the scale yourself, relief can feel unfamiliar, almost suspicious. You might wonder if it's safe to stop adjusting, if letting go means something else will tip. But here's the truth you rarely hear. Balance does not require sacrifice forever. It requires honesty at the right moment. This is one of those moments, not to demand, not to confront, but to allow gravity to do what it was always meant to do. You don't need to announce this shift. You don't need to convince anyone. Your nervous system will register it first. A softer breath. A longer pause before reacting. A sense that one decision feels easier than it did a week ago. And that's how you'll know. Because when correction happens, effort reduces. Let me ask you something quietly. If you no longer had to absorb the imbalance, who would you become with that energy back in your hands? You don't have to answer yet. Just let the question settle. Because the next thing that unfolds doesn't arrive as a dramatic win. It arrives as something far more personal. A release. And once you feel that, you'll understand why everything after this begins to move differently. Libra. This is where things begin to feel different. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just quieter. The first shift doesn't arrive with numbers flashing or doors slamming open. It arrives the way relief usually does in real life. Softly, almost shy. You might notice it in the smallest moment. The bill you expected to dread doesn't hit the same way. A payment you've been bracing for gets delayed or reduced. A responsibility you've been carrying loosens, just enough for your shoulders to drop. And you pause, because something inside you realizes you're not cornered anymore. That tight feeling you've been living with, the one that says everything depends on you, holding it all together starts to ease. Not because you suddenly have more, but because you're no longer being pressed from every side. This is what real relief looks like for grown adults. It doesn't shout, it exhales. And Libra, you've needed that exhale for a long time. You've been navigating life with a quiet alertness, always anticipating the next demand, the next compromise, the next place where you'll have to bend so things don't break. That constant readiness drains more than money ever could. So when the pressure lightens, even slightly, it feels unfamiliar. You may even question it. You might think, is this real Or am I just getting my hopes up again? But here's the truth. Relief doesn't come to trick you. It comes when something is no longer required of you. This first breakthrough is not about gain, it's about space. Space to breathe, space to think clearly, space to stop making decisions from survival mode. And once that space opens, something important happens. Your nervous system recalibrates. You stop rushing internally. You stop scanning for danger in every choice. You begin to respond instead of react. That shift alone is priceless. Because when you're no longer trapped in urgency, you start seeing options that were invisible before. Paths that don't require sacrifice. Solutions that don't cost your peace. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you allowed yourself to feel okay without immediately waiting for the other shoe to drop? That feeling right there, that quiet moment of safety that's not an illusion. It's the signal. This is what happens when the imbalance finally eases. Not all at once. Just enough to remind you what steadiness feels like. And here's why this matters more than you realize. Relief is not the end of the story. It's the doorway. Once you're no longer drowning in pressure, you become visible in a different way. Your clarity sharpens, your presence changes. The way others perceive your value begins to shift. Not because you demand it, but because you're no longer leaking energy. So stay with this feeling for a moment. Let it settle in your chest. Let it teach your body that it's safe to unclench. Because what comes next doesn't arrive as pressure at all. It arrives as recognition. And when that happens, you'll understand why this quiet relief was the necessary beginning. Libra. There's something I want to say that you rarely hear spoken out loud. You've been underestimated. Not because you lack talent, not because you don't show up, but because you make difficult things look effortless. You are the one who keeps the rhythm steady, who notices when something is about to fall apart and quietly steps in before it does, who holds space so others can perform, create, or take credit. And when you do that long enough, people forget it's work. They start assuming the system just runs, that stability just exists, that you don't require acknowledgement because you never asked for it. You learned early that asking can disrupt harmony, so you adapted. You softened your edges. You became dependable instead of visible. But here's where the shift begins to show itself. Between January 5th and 7th, the energy around you changes the way others register your presence. It's subtle, but it's undeniable. Someone pauses where they used to rush past you. Someone looks twice at what you've been carrying all along. Someone realizes that without you, the structure weakens. This isn't praise for praise's sake. It's recognition rooted in necessity. You are not suddenly becoming valuable. Your value is becoming impossible to ignore. And that can feel disorienting. Because when you've spent years being the quiet constant, being seen can feel almost invasive. You might wonder if it's too late. If it matters now, it does. This recognition doesn't arrive to inflate your ego. It arrives to rebalance the exchange. What you've been giving has weight, and weight demands compensation. Sometimes it comes as an offer that surprises you. Sometimes as a door opening that used to be closed. Sometimes as a shift in tone. More respect, more consideration, more fairness attached to the conversation. And yes, often, it carries money with it, not as a reward, but as a correction. Let me ask you something gently. What would change if you stopped explaining why you deserve more and simply allowed it to be acknowledged? Because here's the part that matters. This breakthrough isn't activated by confrontation. It's activated by alignment. by the moment you stop minimizing your role, by the moment you stop smoothing over your own contribution. You don't need to announce your worth. You just need to stop hiding it. And people respond to that shift immediately. They feel it before they understand it. They sense the difference in how you occupy space, in how you speak, in how you pause. This is not about finally being chosen. It's about being recognized as essential. And once that recognition lands, even quietly, it changes the ground beneath you. Because now the question is no longer, can they afford to invest in you? It becomes, can they afford not to stay with that feeling for a moment? Let it settle. Because what unfolds next doesn't come from the outside at all. It begins inside you. And that internal shift, the one where you stop underestimating yourself, is where everything truly starts to transform. Libra. This is the turning point most people never see coming. Not because it's loud, but because it happens inside you first. There comes a moment when something quiet shifts. Not in your bank account, not in your schedule, but in the way you measure yourself. And once that changes, everything else begins to rearrange. For a long time, you've been negotiating your own worth without realizing it. You offered flexibility instead of clarity. You softened your needs to keep the peace intact. You told yourself it was maturity, that it was wisdom. And in many ways, it was. But wisdom is not meant to erase you. This is the season when you stop explaining why your time matters. You stop justifying why your effort deserves respect. You stop feeling responsible for everyone else's comfort at the expense of your own stability. Not with anger, not with walls, just with truth. There's a subtle confidence that arrives when you no longer apologize for having limits. It doesn't need to announce itself. It shows up in the way you pause before answering, in the way you let silence do some of the work, in the way you no longer rush to make things easier for others. And something fascinating happens then. The world adjusts. People sense it immediately. They feel the shift before they understand it. Your energy stops saying, "Please accept me," and starts saying, "This is where I stand." That is when money responds, not as a reward, as a reflection. Because money follows clarity, it follows boundaries, it follows people who know what their presence costs and what it provides. This is why the change feels almost strange at first. You might notice that opportunities begin to meet you halfway, that conversations feel more balanced, that decisions come with fewer internal debates. You're no longer bargaining with yourself. Let me ask you something softly. When did you learn that being fair meant being smaller? Because fairness was never meant to shrink you. It was meant to stabilize the whole. This breakthrough isn't about becoming harder. It's about becoming honest. Honest about what drains you. Honest about what you bring. Honest about what you will no longer trade away just to keep things calm. And when you stop undervaluing yourself, you don't have to chase anything. What belongs with you recognizes you, money included. This doesn't arrive all at once. It comes in responses, in follow-ups, in offers that feel cleaner, in numbers that finally match the weight you carry. And the most important part is this. You don't feel guilty anymore. You don't second-guess whether it's too much. You don't shrink back after being seen. You receive with steadiness. That is the real breakthrough. So take a moment here. Let this truth settle in your body. You are not becoming someone new. You are returning to your proper scale. And once you stand there, fully, without apology, something even deeper begins to unfold. Not a push, not a fight. A different relationship with abundance itself. And that is where the next chapter quietly opens. Libra. This is why the shift you're feeling now doesn't resemble anything you've known before. It's not louder. It's not faster. It doesn't arrive with urgency or force. It arrives with finality. Not the kind that closes your world. The kind that closes a chapter you've been quietly living inside for years. When we say the final shift, we're not talking about the last change you'll ever experience. Life doesn't stop evolving. But there are moments when an old pattern releases its grip for good. This is one of those moments. For a long time, your life has been shaped by a silent agreement. An agreement you never signed out loud, but one you honored faithfully. You would give more so others felt at ease. You would carry extra weight so things stayed peaceful. You would accept just enough so no one felt uncomfortable around your needs. That agreement helped you survive. It taught you grace. It taught you awareness, but it also taught you to live slightly under your true capacity. And here's the truth most people never acknowledge. Cycles don't end when you understand them. They end when you stop feeding them. This shift feels different because you're no longer trying to prove anything. You're no longer pushing back against the imbalance. You're no longer explaining why it hasn't been fair. You've stepped out of the argument entirely. And when that happens, the scale corrects itself. Not through conflict, through gravity. The energy that once demanded effort from you now begins to move on its own. What required constant adjustment no longer asks for your attention. You may notice it in subtle ways. You stop volunteering for roles that drain you. You stop overextending just to keep everything smooth. You stop accepting arrangements that leave you quietly depleted. And nothing collapses. In fact, things stabilize. That's how you know this cycle is complete. Because peace no longer costs you. Balance no longer requires self-sacrifice. This is not a victory you need to defend. It's a state you simply occupy. Let me ask you something softly. What happens when you stop carrying what was never meant to be yours alone? That question matters now, because the answer reshapes how you move forward. The final shift changes everything because it doesn't ask you to become someone new. It allows you to stop being someone you had to be. You're no longer living in maintenance mode. You're no longer managing imbalance as a lifestyle. You're standing on level ground. And from here, decisions feel cleaner. Money feels less charged. Your future feels less like a negotiation and more like a direction. This isn't the end of growth. It's the end of compensation. The end of doing extra just to feel secure. The end of stretching yourself thin to keep the scales from tipping. Take a breath here. Let that land. Because what comes next doesn't ask you to correct anything at all. It invites you into a new relationship. One built not on effort, but on alignment. And that relationship with money, with stability with yourself, is where the story quietly deepens from here. Libra. This is where the story softens into something steadier. For so long, money has felt like something you had to manage emotionally. Not just practically, but internally. Like a current you had to swim against while pretending you were calm. You were taught, directly or indirectly, that wanting stability meant you were asking for too much. That ease was indulgent, that security had to be earned through tension. So you learned to chase balance by effort, to hold yourself together tightly, to stay alert even when nothing was wrong. But here is the quiet truth. You were never meant to run after money. You were meant to create the conditions where it feels safe to stay. And after January 5th through 7th, something in you understands that differently. You begin to notice that when you are less strained, things move more smoothly. When you stop gripping so hard, decisions become clearer. When fear loosens its hold, your judgment sharpens instead of blurring. This is not magic. It is maturity. You start managing from presence instead of panic. You respond instead of reacting. You choose sustainability over urgency. And money responds to that shift. Because money, at its healthiest, is not attracted to chaos. It is attracted to rhythm, to consistency, to people who are not negotiating with scarcity in every breath. You may notice that your relationship with earning changes first. You pace yourself better. You stop overgiving. You allow yourself to be compensated without discomfort. Then you notice how you hold what you receive. Less guilt, less anxiety, more intention. And the most surprising part. You begin to trust yourself with abundance, not in a reckless way, in a grounded way. You no longer feel the need to prove responsibility through deprivation. You no longer believe that safety requires self-denial. That is a powerful shift. Let me ask you something quietly. What would your life look like if money were no longer something you had to outsmart or survive, but something you collaborated with? Because this new relationship is built on balance, not extremes, not feast or famine, not holding or losing, but circulation. Money coming in at a pace that matches your life. Money going out with awareness, not fear. Money staying long enough to build something real. This is not about becoming wealthy overnight. It is about becoming stable in a way that lasts. Drama fades here. Urgency dissolves. You stop bracing for the next hit, and when that happens, you begin to notice something else. Your energy changes, your posture shifts, your choices feel cleaner. People sense that, opportunities sense that, because sustainability is attractive. Take a breath with me. Let this idea land. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not broken. You are recalibrating. And as this new rhythm settles in, there is one final invitation waiting for you. A quiet reminder that this window did not open to test you. It opened to meet you. And what you do next does not require force. It requires presence. And that is where the final moment gently comes into view. Libra, this is where everything becomes very simple. Not easy, but clear. This window you are standing in was never meant to overwhelm you. It was never asking for a dramatic leap or a risky move. It was asking for something much quieter, your willingness to stay open. You have spent a long time protecting yourself by staying reasonable, by not expecting too much, by telling yourself that patience was the same thing as readiness. And patience did serve you. It kept you steady when others burned out. It helped you survive seasons that would have broken someone louder. But now the invitation is different. Now it asks you not to wait, but to receive. That can feel strange when you are used to earning everything through effort. When your instinct is to stay measured, to stay neutral, to stay prepared for disappointment. So let me say this gently. Do not disqualify yourself at the door of your own life if something small opens in front of you. A conversation that feels unexpectedly supportive, an idea that returns with more clarity than before. An invitation that doesn't come with pressure, but still makes your chest warm. That is not coincidence. That is alignment asking for participation. You do not need to rush toward it. You do not need to analyze it to death. You only need to take one honest step, because this window is not about proving anything. It is about allowing what is already in motion to meet you halfway. And here is the part most people miss. Receiving does not make you less grounded. It makes you more honest. You are not betraying your values by accepting ease. You are honoring the balance you have been building all along. So if you feel the urge to pull back, to downplay, to say maybe later, pause. Ask yourself something quietly. What if this moment is not asking for courage but for trust? Trust in your timing, trust in your judgment, trust that you no longer need to carry everything alone. Sometimes the most powerful act is simply saying yes without rehearsing the consequences. And if you want to anchor this energy in your body, if you want to hear yourself claim what you have earned emotionally and practically, you can leave a comment that says, "I am ready to receive what is finally balanced for me." Not for visibility, not for validation, but because hearing your own voice acknowledge that truth changes something inside. This is not the end of your story. It is the moment the tone shifts, from holding to allowing, from managing to living. Stay with that feeling, because the next steps do not need to be loud to be real. They only need to be true. And Libra, you are already standing exactly where you need to be to let what is meant for you find its way home. Libra, before you go anywhere, take one more breath with me, because moments like this don't pass loudly, they settle. They leave a quiet mark. If something in this message surprised you, not shocked you, but surprised you in that gentle way where your body recognizes truth before your mind explains it, that matters. That is not imagination. That is alignment. You are not standing at the end of something tonight. You are standing at the place where balance finally stops being an effort and starts becoming your natural state again. And I want you to hear this clearly. You were never behind. You were never overlooked by life. You were being prepared to hold more without losing yourself. That kind of readiness doesn't come from rushing. It comes from patience, from discernment, from choosing peace even when it cost you. But now, the cost shifts. What you've been carrying begins to lighten. What you've been waiting for begins to respond. And what you once doubted yourself for wanting no longer feels unreasonable. It feels right. So if this message touched you, if it named something you have felt but never fully said out loud, let that be your sign to stay connected here. Leave a comment and write, "I am ready to receive what's finally balanced for me." Not for me, for you. Because when you name readiness, you stop living on the edge of possibility and step into participation. If you found comfort here, or clarity, or even just a moment where your shoulders softened, please take a second to like this video. It tells the space that this kind of message matters. And if you are part of the Libra community, the ones learning to live without overcorrecting, the ones choosing harmony without self-erasure, the ones ready for stability that lasts, subscribe. Not because you need more content, but because this journey continues. There is another message coming, another layer opening, another moment where things click quietly into place. And when it does, I want you to already be here. Until then, Libra, trust yourself more than the noise. Trust the steadiness returning to your life. Trust that balance is no longer something you chase, but something you live inside. You're doing better than you think. And what's unfolding next is meant to meet you exactly where you are. I'll see you in the next message.